Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of you, and peace out to the rest of you. Black heart, black mind, black end. Again, hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger, as I always say. Here's the deal. First, sorry about the echo, but that's actually a good thing in this case. The alternative is far worse. Secondly, I'm going live because I may cover some other topics in addition, but I'm going to get right to it because you all will catch this on the playback, and I'm not going to wait for many people to log in because of the time of day that it is in most parts of the United States, where most of you are, like 98% of my audience last time I checked was coming out of the United States. But it is anywhere between 3 a.m. to 11 p.m. yesterday or 11 p.m. last night, my time, for all of you. So understand I'm doing this live for those who are up and may catch this. I have some time to allow people to come on towards the end, the way things are looking right now. But I'm aware that most of you are going to catch the playback for this, and that's all right. Now, chances are Art Zuck is going to come in because he is actually several hours ahead of me. And there's a narrow stretch of time or a narrow part of time in which I can come in and come live, and you all are there, and then he's also up and awake with y'all. And I want to give a shout out to Botla Dola. You know who you are. You know what's happening. To the one that just came in, thank you so much. Go ahead and hit that share button, please. Let people know, like I say, the message is more important than me. MOT a few days ago covered how the people of style and substance can't mix. And I want to reiterate the importance of that for this reason. Style and substance they come together to make us human. So I'm not saying that there's not a need for both, but everything alive that has to consume something else for its own fuel must prioritize substance over style. Style comes later. Style is something you develop when you've got your substance in order. It is perfectly okay. Style is fine. It is very human, but it is never the priority over substance unless you're ready to die, or unless you just don't need to consume anything to stay alive. Well, as we know, the only superpower is God. And I mean the only, because even the angels rely on God for their own existence. So in that case, that being said, it is not wrong to have both. But style is supposed to be something that you add to the substance to show that you've got the substance already there, to make it easier for people to make the right choices. It is a subconscious weapon or aid. Style is like a subconscious sharp edge. Now, if that sharp edge is a scalpel, you use it for surgery, you get tumors out of people, you get splinters, you get things out of people's bodies that are going to hurt them. Or it can be a knife in which you inflict the injuries yourself and maybe even kill the opponent. Depending on how carefully you wield it is going to determine its results. But style is like that very, very sharp edge. If you have substance behind it, it is a surgical scalpel and an instrument to save patients' lives. And if you don't really think much of it, you don't have much substance behind how you wield it, it just becomes a dangerous knife. And you're just cutting folks and causing all kind of internal injuries and bleeding. You just stab them. We are people that have, of course, prioritized style over substance. And I want to point out something that is it's a bombshell. What I'm going to tell you next about prioritizing style over substance is something that we know. If you've listened to me before, you definitely know, but you didn't know that it had any relationship to this. We are not the only people who do this. The first important thing to understand is that most melanated people have a problem with prioritizing style over substance. In America, you're going to see the people that have been handpicked by U.S. embassies and consulates for visas to go to the U.S. Those are the ones that you're seeing. Those people are not struggling. They're not suffering. That's why you see them, and you don't see the ones that they left behind. And they have hierarchies even amongst themselves. So you might think that the Japanese person just took a bowl of rice and turned it into a restaurant 10 minutes later. We love to say this. And that's one of Paul Mooney's famous jokes. And that it was funny. I give him that. I mean, he's a comic genius. I'm not going to lie about that. But do you really think that that's possible? You really think that you just handed somebody from Eastern Asia a bowl of rice and they came back and it was a restaurant? I mean, if people really could do that, let's call it what it is. If that really was possible and it wasn't just a funny exaggeration, nobody would have any pets left. And I'm not saying that to be racist, because I don't hate anybody based on their DNA sequence or because someone else stereotyped them. I'm saying this based on what health workers and health inspectors of restaurants themselves have reported. That's where I'm getting this from. What I'm saying is that anybody, in order to do something like that, is going to have to cut some corners. So if anyone's going to turn something into a restaurant, turn a bowl of food into a restaurant, they're cutting corners somewhere. And the thing I want y'all to understand is that these other groups of people have prioritized style over substance collectively. You're seeing individuals who have not done so, or whose previous generations did not make their living doing so. That's what you're seeing. Or you're seeing individuals who have. See, maybe what happens is that they get people to put money into their accounts so they can produce a bank statement for the U.S. consulate and embassy abroad to give the impression that they actually can bring something to the table when they go to the States. Then they get the visa and they give people their money back. And they got the rest of the paperwork in order. But then they give the other folks their money back. That means there's got to be some trust. Or it means that somebody's going to make sure they don't catch that flight to fit the guck out of that country and go to the States. That's what that means. So first thing you need to understand about prioritizing style over substance is that, yes, we do it. We know we do it. Other groups of people do it too. They just don't show us the results of it. A lot of the Asians that you think are successful are up to their eyeballs in debt. And when I say Asians, I'm referring to the South Asians, the Indians, Pakistanis, and Bengalis. Mostly Indians and Pakistanis, because they're more concerned about that thing in image, as well as the East Asians, the Chinese and the Koreans specifically. They are up to their eyeballs in it. Let's be honest about that. It's funny to them to stunt on us. And it really, I want you to notice, they stunt on each other and they like to stunt on us. They don't stunt on white folks. None of us really think we can even go and stunt on white folks, because we understand that they bring a substance behind their style, and that they prioritize that substance over their style. And so first, we do have to understand that while style is okay, it can't be prioritized over substance, but we also must understand that we're not the only group of people to do it. Now, why do I tell you this? Well, because if we collectively start to prioritize substance over style, I mean, where the majority of us are doing this, we will be the first group of people to go from where we are now, because other groups of people are where we are now, really, if you want to know the truth. You just have to go to their home countries to see their riffraff. You got to leave the States and go there to see and then you will see their riffraff. You'll see why they want to go to the States. But when we do this, collectively speaking, as a majority, then what's going to wind up happening is that we're going to be the first people to do this. We become the model of liberation and self-improvement for other ethnicities, even if we didn't want to be, especially if we did not want to be. So this is a paradox. We won't want to be an example for others, but we will wind up becoming one the day that we choose to not be the example. Ironic, isn't it? But the style over substance also has one method think of it as a disease. And how does this disease keep on going and going and going and going? Because we all grow up. We go from childhood to teenage years, adolescence, into adulthood. We reach adulthood. Most of us stop prioritizing style over substance as adults. Why the hell does this remain too big a part of our culture, though? Something happens in the adolescent years. There's one mechanism that this thing relies on. Prioritization of style over substance is a part of nigger culture, not black culture, but nigger culture. But how does this nigger culture permeate the majority of the black population, even though most adults know that they have to prioritize substance over style and not style over substance? Real simple. The adolescent years. The children are going to do what the parents say, for the most part, but they're going to fall victim to peer pressure. The adolescents are going to fall even more victim to peer pressure, if you haven't noticed. Even adults fall victim to it to a certain extent. But it's those adolescent years, because what happens then, they spend more time with each other and less time being supervised by adults beyond the teen years. And then they're also exposed to TV's messages. So they become more exposed to everybody else that's not paying their bills, and they become the least exposed to the righteous indoctrination of those of us that are paying their bills, the parents, the guardians. This is what happens. It happens in white society too. But there's something in their minds that they're going to have to grow up one day. There's something in our minds that we got to stay too cool for that stuff. We outgrow that, but we're delayed from outgrowing that until it's too late. This is what's important for us to realize. What I'm saying is that once we become parents, we're going to have to tightly control our offspring through the adolescent years. Don't turn them loose in large groups of each other without our supervision. That's what the secret is. A lot of us have done this because we're exhausted. Mentally and physically, we're very exhausted. But I'm not going to sit up here and say that we don't need to have more people. What I am going to say is that we need to focus on quality of who we're raising above quantity. We need to focus on the quality. It is better to raise 2 sterling adults than it is to raise 8 normal people that are just kind of, just all right. They just sort of all over the place. You don't want that. Better to raise 2 that are sterling. Better to raise 3 that are sterling. We're going to have to focus on quality above quantity. Now, when we have it to where we can afford on average to raise more, then we can start worrying about quality because we can worry about quantity because the quality is there. But oftentimes people that are at war are the main ones that are focused on the quantity of their own people, how many people they have. Palestine is an example. Palestinians, when they marry, they start kicking out a bunch of kids. But see, they have to try to increase their population. What they fail to understand now, what they just didn't know back then and now have to face the reality of, is that that large population has to be fed, but it's not armed well enough to deal with their enemy. That's what they don't realize. I don't blame them. But Israel focused more so on quality. They don't care if they don't care if a couple has 1 child or 10. They're going to use that U.S. aid money and they're going to educate their population to quality levels and take care of them at quality levels, so that a few of them can not only repel but outright subdue and oppress a larger population surrounding them, and then make that population smaller, which they've now begun to do. Because they prioritized substance over style. It's not that the two can't go together. It's just the substance must come first. We don't have it. So at this point, this means that we're going to have to prioritize substance over style. And to a certain extent, we're going to have to look at style as being ahead of its time, putting the cart before the horse. You don't look at style and say, there's nothing wrong with a car that looks great as long as it runs well. But you're going to have to look, and as a matter of fact, cleanliness and hygiene are still necessary. Those are still necessities. So even if you got a car that just kind of looks ugly, at least you hope it's clean and try to keep it clean on the inside as well as running well in the engine. But what I'm getting at here is that style needs to be seen as putting the cart before the horse. It's great for the future, but you got to get the horse first. And that's what we've been doing. We've been putting the cart before the horse. And a lot of our men have outgrown this, to be honest with you. Grown men have outgrown this. The thing is that because we've made sex too easy for women, and by extension, we've even made marriage too easy for them, they haven't had to outgrow this. This has been our mistake. I've always said, when women want you to take accountability as men, you take accountability for making things too easy for them. Because in reality, it's not just the teenagers being unsupervised by adults and having indoctrination from each other and from the TV that turns our culture into this nigger culture of prioritizing the style over the substance. What's happening, Brother Johnson? Thanks to me and HTS. Y'all hit the share button if y'all can, because the message is more important than me. Yeah, it is. It's late, or rather too early. I'm not sure which one to call it. But see, the thing is, this mechanism that I was talking about that allows nigger culture to continue, even though most of us outgrow that teenage nigger phase, is not only in the indoctrination through the TV, but it is also because the girls at that age are not trying to impress the boys per se. Well, let me explain. Let me rephrase that. They're not trying to get the boys. They're just trying to get their attention and impress them, but not actually get them. Whereas we males at that age are trying to actually impress and be with them. And that's the mistake. Because you guys got to remember, we're in a gynocracy. And that gynocracy is calling shots. We have to keep this in mind. They're prioritizing style over substance, and they're demanding that you do the same thing as a man, yet and still demanding the substance. Demanding that you prioritize some style over substance to get them, and then still demanding substance from them. And this is part of why it is that in order to do what I'm saying, many of us are simply going to have to step out. You can't go to Becky for that, because Becky, she may not tell you have to prioritize style over substance. She may not say that, but that's only because Becky's been trained to think of you as stylish by default anyway. Then when it's time to get that substance, she's going to demand more substance from you. She will demand more substance from you than Sapphire will. Sapphire demands that you prioritize style over substance when you're young to get her. Then you have to somehow magically have substance to keep her. So Sapphire's got these mutually exclusive standards. But Becky knows goddamn well that her dad, Brad, is discriminating against you in the job market. So what does she do? She turns around and says, you've got to have more substance than I would demand from Chad, Brad Jr. And when you actually get it, she's going to take half. That's damn near guaranteed. So what I'm saying is we have to step out, and we don't need to step out with Becky. If we want to change our wealth and change the culture so that the wealth can be sustained and developed. First off, don't get it twisted. I'm not excusing white supremacists for the roles they played in burning down what we built. They've done it before. They will do it again. They may be a little bit more reluctant, but if it comes to it, they will. Because resources, they are not like rights. Rights are not like pie. I treat somebody else well, so I got to treat someone else bad. That doesn't exist. But if I pay somebody that I owe, I've got less to pay other people if I owe them. That is pie. And when it comes down to that pie, they're going to kill us. So I'm not excusing them. What I am saying is that in order to build something that is worth having and passing on and then keep it, we do have to focus on the defense of it. But we can't bring most sapphires with us. I mean, you can't bring any sapphire with you. You can bring an intelligent sister with you. But as we already know, they've been silenced and they're undetectable. Either they're already with someone and living a quiet life, and it better be quiet, or they speak up and they get silenced. It's one of those two. That's what winds up happening. So in many cases, I'm not saying they're no good sisters, but what I am saying is most of us ain't going to find them. Whether they're a minority or a majority doesn't matter. They're hidden. They're either taken or they're hidden. You can't find them because the minute they make themselves distinguishable so that you can notice them, others are calling them pick-me's and pick-meishas and shaming them. And just like we've seen the white supremacists will resort to violence to trash our advancement and to ruin it, keep in mind, the sapphires and the boom shikas and bonquishas will resort to violence against the so-called pick-meishas. When it comes down to it, they'll do that if they have access. They will definitely do it. Because remember, they still demand substance. They just demand that on the back end. And if they don't get what they'll do in many cases is a dual mating strategy. They're going to take that requirement of style and they'll get one man, they'll get the guy that's got that style. And we already know they'll take the one that's got that style, and then they'll go to somebody else for the substance to raise the baby of the one with the style. And they will compete for the one with the style. But if you got the substance and you don't have the style, even though they may have to share you, you better not tell them that. You can't show that to them. Because even though you got the substance and maybe could even afford for them to share you with someone else, they'll cut you for doing that. But the one with the style, they're not necessarily going to cut for doing that. They're going to fuss at him and then make up and let him hit that again raw and make another baby and then bring that other baby to some of us with the substance. Even if the substance is not wealth, it's just substantial. They'll still come to us with that. And that's what I was talking about in my last one. Cafe Mocha de Paris was talking about that. She was pretty much going at a double mating strategy. Shout out to her for pointing that out. But see, what we got to understand is that just like the teenage girls, not even the ladies per se, but the teenage girls set the stage for them to be able to do this later on. We men are going to have to set the stage from a young age, and we're going to have to tell these young brothers before they're even in their teens. We're going to have to tell younger black male relatives of our sons, nephews, cousins, younger brothers, we got to tell them before they hit their teens, when they're still in the end of elementary school, certain things so that they will then set the stage to where they can come later on and say to sisters, you don't wait until you had somebody else's baby and gained 30 pounds and picked up all this debt and lost all these assets and gotten loose, if you know what I mean, to come and start showing me appreciation. You do that for me when you're young and tight and childless like me. You don't just do it when you're young. You do it when I'm young too, because that's when it counts. You don't wait till my testosterone levels dip. No, you do it when I'm young and I ain't got no money. But I can pull out and hit the opposite wall if you catch my drift. You tell them that. You tell these young cats to raise the standards when they're young. And in this way, when they get into that teenage mindset, they get into the years and the mindset. Number one, the shyness that they've had as a child is not subdued, because this is one of our mistakes in the culture. We tell young guys before they even hit puberty they need to be punani hounds and chasing the draws, and that's a mistake. We shouldn't be doing that. There's a natural shyness that comes with kids, and what we should be doing with this natural shyness that children in general have, male or female, is that we should be cultivating that in the men and the little boys. You know what? You're right to be careful. We should call it being careful. You're right to be careful, because you're the one that's going to have to pay the cost to be the boss, even if you're not the boss. We got to let these cats know. This is how you upset the apple cart, change this culture. You're telling them prioritize the substance over the style. And if that means that when you get older and you can't date and mate and marry within our race, God damn it, you don't do it. Now, I'm not saying to push off Africa from the menu. I'm just saying Africa's big. It does change from place to place. There are parts of Africa where they want that white man and that Chinese man, and they don't even want another man of color. They want the oppressor, specifically the colonizer. It has to be someone that is benefiting from black people not getting their due for the resources underneath their feet. There are some parts of Africa like that. They don't want even other men of color. He must be white or Chinese, taking the resources from Africa. I mean, there are women like that in some parts, and in other parts, there are Pan-African women. They say that Nigerian women are very promiscuous and materialistic, and that Ghanaian women are quite Pan-African. That's what I've heard. But of course, on an individual level, it has to change from person to person. So I'm just simply saying that some people may have a higher chance of experiencing one in one place and experiencing the other in the other place. Or one may be easier to find in one place. But of course, every Nigerian woman can't be materialistic or promiscuous, and every Ghanaian woman can't be Pan-African. But the chances of meeting each one in each place, like I mentioned, may be there. I haven't been to either one yet. What I'm simply saying is Africa's different. So in terms of Africa, you got to look at different parts and see what it's like. And really see how well you gel in that particular culture. That's what you'd have to do. But when it comes down to who you're going to build with, if you're not going to plan to live your life alone, then you got to plan it with someone else. And what I would say is Southeast Asia at this point. Now, I understand that Malaysia's got a problem, but at least in Malaysia, you've got two different things. You got two different options. It's the paradigm, a dichotomy that the women there have to choose between. They can try to be modern, party girls, living wild and all that other stuff, or they can try to be pious Muslimas. Those are their options there. And the pious Muslimas do find husbands. The party girls find boyfriends, the pious Muslimas find husbands. That's what happens there. So, and they call them coach bag girls, I think, the ones that want to be party animals, and they want to get gifts from men right now that they can show off to each other. They're referred to as coach bag girls because they brag about the coach bags they got men to buy for them. And then, of course, they're the pious Muslims. They may like you, they may not. You may be their type, you may not. But if you are their type, they're not going to mess with you unless you're talking to their family about marriage. And yeah, they'll screw your brains out after the marriage contract. And they'll treat you like you really matter and like you mean something after the marriage contract. And if they like you, then they agree to marry you. That's the sign. So at least you have an option there. In Indonesia, Artzak can tell you, the men there don't have a problem with you marrying Indonesian women as long as you treat them well. But Artzak will say to you, you have to be ready for them to start asking dumb questions because of what they've seen regarding African Americans on TV. But they'll still give you a chance. They're fair-minded. They have a wait and see approach. Okay, well, I just met one in person. I'll see what he's like. I'm not going to assume the TV's true. I'm going to ask questions. The questions may be dumb questions, but they ask. Now, to answer HTS about Middle Eastern women as potential mates, I'll be honest with you. I married one, if you want to call her a Middle Easterner, she was a Black North African, but she was about as unrecognizable to Black people as I am. And she treated me very well, but by the same token, she was a widow. At that time, I just begun the divorce. We had equal number of kids, but her first husband passed away. So as far as I could tell, I was her type. She wasn't coming to me only because she had these babies. Somebody introduced us, actually. And I wasn't trying to have any more of my own babies, so it was okay, it worked out. But my situation is very different. She was a year older than me, but she didn't look even close to my age. So I was somewhat fortunate in this regard. But the thing was, I had to get on her one day about trying to justify the way that other people in her country felt about the tropical Black West Africans that were living in her country. We had an argument. I thought that when she requested a divorce, that was why. Later, she explained that it wasn't that. It was because the government was refusing to recognize the marriage. And it was going to cause a legal danger for both of us anytime I went into the country to visit. And that was why she requested. So I found out later after the fact. But what I'm saying is that attitude against tropical Black West Africans is going to be there amongst them. Not necessarily hatred, but just they don't feel like we're equal to them a lot of times. So the Middle East is a big place too. I mean, like Africa, it's going to depend based, from country to country. But what I would say is this: if you're going to deal with a Middle Easterner, they got Black Middle Easterners. Get with them and make sure that she is. Granted, you should be Muslim if she's Muslim, but also make sure that she is happy to be of African origin. If she's got any issue with that, if she's got a problem being of African origin, then kick her to the curb and go to the continent. You'll find sisters that don't mind being African. Assalamu alaikum, Ibn Noor. Setahai. Wa kufra sanahai na kuwarko marakale. In the Middle East, there are dowries on average. Men have to pay the dowries, but then again, you're paying, you're the boss anyway. So you pay the cost, you are the boss. That's just understood. But the thing is that in order for us to look at building this stuff, you're building something in which the teenagers don't fall off every single generation. That's what I'm talking about, trying to get something in which the teenagers get properly socialized again, like they did when they were children. And so therefore they don't have to go through this teenage nigger phase. In order to build that, we're not going to be able to focus and limit ourselves to African American ladies or African Canadian women or Black British women or the Black Western European women. In other words, the sisters from first world countries, we're pretty much going to have to write off unless they come to us and they got their stuff on point. Because if we limit ourselves like what they're talking about, then what's going to happen is they're going to take advantage of the fact that we're limiting ourselves to them. We've already seen they're not limiting themselves to us. There's a whole divestment movement. I mean, Daniel Cameron with his little punk behind because of what he didn't do not doing his job. He's catching all kind of flack for who he's married to. Okay, well, if that worked both ways, we could at least say it's consistent, but it's not the same people going in on him. I mean, okay, some people are going in on him and Kamala Harris. A lot of us are doing that. But people going in on him outnumber the ones that are going in on Kamala Harris for who he married. And that's what's inconsistent about us. They got a whole movement like that. So, yeah, you're welcome, HTS. I hope it works, man. I really do. But yeah, you need to apply the reverse paper bag test with a Middle Eastern woman, because most Middle Easterners call us slaves. Even if they don't hate us, they call us slaves, like right off the bat, and they think it's normal. It's like, you know those ignorant rednecks that grow up in the mountains and they think it's normal to call us nigger. That's what it's like. I mean, here some people think the word nigger is not an insult, and I've had to tell some of them, I don't beat them right off the bat because they don't know, but I got to tell them actually that's an insult. It's like when white people call you a terrorist, you start crying. Same with us. But y'all say it to each other. Yeah, but you can joke about each other being terrorists, but we can't do that. Well, it's the same thing. And then they kind of get it. But no, man, the black Middle Easterners, that's where I would go. If I was in your shoes, I would look for the black Middle Easterners. But it also depends too, because Southeast Asia is also good. Even if you're Muslim, Southern Philippines. I know a brother that's married to a Muslima from the Southern Philippines. He said he is spoiled. He said he is spoiled rotten. And he drives trucks half the year in the States, and he goes to the Philippines and spends the other half the year, usually the winter months, with his wife. And he was talking about that, and he was saying that now he's looking for a way to just make a little residual income stateside so that he can go straight to the Philippines and stay there the whole year with his wife. Yeah, so yeah, Rael is right. I mean, the continent is big. You just got to know which part you mesh with and gel with. And one of the things that tends to help is which language you can learn the most easily too. That tends to play a big part in it. What you believe, what they believe, and how easily you can pick up their language. Because even though most of Africa speaks either English, French, or Portuguese as one of the first languages, you still got to keep in mind that it's going to help you to be able to at least understand it. Because not everybody from their country is going to be okay. They're not going to. Not all of them are going to be okay with it. Plus, it just helps when you learn compliments. When you learn to compliment people in their languages, oh, that gets you far with anybody, male or female. It really does. And so, anyway, in order to keep the culture, in order to start and maintain a culture of substance, what I'm getting at is that we're going to have to write off sisters from Western, first world countries. We're going to have to write them off, except for the ones that not only come to you, but have their stuff together and then come to you. In other words, they need to be trying to compete to get you before you get enough resources to go abroad and meet someone and their families, and y'all just gel. They need to be trying to do that. And we know they're not going to do that. Because the first sisters that start doing this when they're young and hot and tight are going to be called pick-me-shoes by the rest of them. We already know they're going to be silenced and shamed. So if they're going to do that, if they're going to be silenced and shamed, I'm talking about the good ones that would be willing to do this. They're probably going to wait until something's wrong to where they could justify doing that, where they can justify jumping on and trying to get on with us brothers and say, look, I'm going to help you out like right now. I'm going to help you build your future now. If they are to say, okay, well, look, see, when they're in the hair salons, that's when they got to do the justification for what they've done. I already know. My own mother told me about that one. And when they're sitting in the hair salons, sometimes they're asked, like, how did he approach you? And that's one of the things at times that might end a relationship. Maybe you are, it could very well be that you're talking to her and things are going okay, and then she just changes up. Sometimes, a lot of times it's not just someone else. It's also that she went and got her hair done, and she was sitting up talking. They were talking about how they got approached, and she said something about how she met you, and they put her down for it. Made her feel like she was just too easy. And because of that, she now she's looking at somebody else, and she's looking to duck you. And you didn't do anything different. That does happen a lot of times. But if she says, well, actually, I caught his eye and I asked him for directions. If she says that, she can justify that if she says, Yeah, but girl, he takes care of me and my kids from another man. Okay, well, yeah, she can justify it that way because they know that's scandalous and it's not a good deal for you. So they're going to give her props for it because the majority of them are enemies to normal men like us. That's where the difference comes in. Most of us are not enemies to them. Most of them, the majority of them, or at least the loudest minority of them, are enemies to us. And so we have to understand this in order to build this culture in which the teenagers don't fall off. We're going to have to tell these young men right off the bat. We're going to have to tell these young men, listen, first off, you're not the shyness you have right now. That's okay. You're actually just being careful and don't let anybody tell you any different. Because they got hoops and walls for you to jump over and jump through. You're allowed to have the same thing. They got standards. You're allowed to have standards. You're supposed to have standards, and they should equal out. You're not less valuable than they are. And you tell them, look, we're not animals. Don't let somebody else tell you, man, the boy dog always goes over to the girl dog, because that's not even true biologically speaking. Plus, we're not dogs, and we need to get out of this mindset that we're dogs. And when we've built this, when we set it up in their minds that they need to be disrespectful of teenage nigger culture and look down on it, and they go through these years, and then we also supervise them so that the peer group never becomes a bigger indoctrinator than we who pay their bills and are related to them, then we're going to have a generation that's going to come, or at least we're going to have a crop of guys that come out of their teenage years and graduate from high school without that teenage nigger dysfunctional mindset. Because, okay, guys, how many of you know what I mean when I say the acronym IDNS? How many of you have heard me use that acronym before? I'm looking in the chat now to see what y'all are saying. So tell me if y'all remember me using the term IDNS before. Okay, Timothy Johnson says never. When I use the term IDNS, what's up, Ibn Noor? I'm going to have to teach a class in a little while, Ibn Noor, but I'm not opposed. But what I think we should do is I would like to schedule a live stream. I wouldn't mind that. You and I could schedule one, inshallah, and then we could schedule it and pick the topic. Now, what I'll do, Ibn Noor, is if you can either leave a comment with your email address, you can leave a comment here or underneath any of my videos, and then I would email you back and forth, and then we could work that. Why would you say that about yourself? Okay, Ibn Noor, when you say lame, do you mean that like there's a physical injury, or do you mean that your personality is lame? I'm not sure which one you mean. Because I want to respond based on what you actually said. I don't want to respond to something you didn't mean. But see, in the States, we use the term lame. In the States, we use the term lame at times to mean just that men don't respect you and women don't like you. But it literally means suffering from a physical disability. So I want to make sure that I know exactly what you meant. Okay, you meant that. All right. Well, the thing is, man, what I know about Somali women is that if they give you trouble in the West, then if they give you trouble in the West, they're going to try to get into the ears of the more traditional ones. But I agree with you. For the most part, don't marry the ones in the West, no matter how you look in general, unless somebody can come to you and tell you that she's a good person and she also looks good to your eye. I could say that, not because of Somalis, but because of the West. I don't necessarily have to understand a lot about the Somali culture, but I do know that we got a lot of similarities. And I'm a Creole from the Gulf Coast. And in actuality, I found out recently that our cultures are more similar than what we would have thought. I found this out over the past year. From Istanbul, Kosword mine. All right. Yeah, if you leave me your email address, then I'll work out with you a time and the topic, inshallah. I'm going to answer the question now. I'm going to explain to the guys why I said idness. IDNS stands for intentionally dysfunctional negative stereotype. Again, that's intentionally dysfunctional negative stereotype. And I pronounce negative like that intentionally. I meant to say that way. That's what idness means. The thing is that when I put it into the comments, it doesn't allow it. That's the funny thing about it. But when I pronounced it negative, I meant it. I meant exactly that, because it's not just negative, but it's this idea we have that that we are supposed to be a negative people. I put it in chat. This idness culture is something that is carried on through the teenagers. Let's be honest. Mature parents are not passing this on to the kids. Immature parents, yes, but let's be honest. Mature parents are not teaching kids to act idness, to believe the stereotypes that white supremacists have of us. They're not the ones doing that. What it is that this happens in the teenage years, and it is the television and teenagers themselves that maintain this, so that separate from the upbringing of the parents, independent of the upbringing of the parents, every teenager has to go through this phase. That's what it is. So what I'm talking about is us changing the mindset of younger guys before they're in their teens regarding dating, women, academics, and overall substance over style. That's what I'm talking about us doing. When we do that, in order to keep that going, one of the things we have to tell them, because they're going to get to the teenage years and they're going to become interested in ladies, and ladies are going to be interested in them, but we have to tell them, okay, you're not an idness. We didn't raise you that way, and you're coming into your teenage years without this idness mindset. You need to go ahead and plan your life one or two ways, either by yourself for your safety, or equally for your safety with someone that is not a Black Western woman. You just can't stay with the Black Western woman until she changes who she is collectively. And if you're going to be with one, she needs to be not Westernized, even if she's Western born, and she needs to come to you with her substance and everything in order. That's what needs to happen. When she's young and tight, and when you're young and you don't have much. And some might say, a lot of ladies are going to say, well, see, Black Mind's saying that she needs to bring all this, and all he's bringing is potential. And they may say that. Yeah, I get that. But on the flip side, you could wait until you're old, but then you're old. You see what I mean? And I would agree, yeah, it does mean you need your own polity. But the polity's got to be in the head before it can be on land. Now, I'm all for people that want to go, like, let's say going to Freedom, Georgia. I'm all for people that might want to do that. Or Freedom Nation, Georgia. These are two different things. Freedom Nation, Georgia, and Freedom, Georgia are two different things, but they got the same mindset or the same idea behind them. I'm all for it. Freedom Nation seems to be a little bit more prepared. But what I'm gonna say is that I'm all for doing that. But the other thing that needs to be understood is that it must be done in mind with building another culture. And if you can't move, then you still fight against the culture as it is where you are. And in order to fight against this culture of style over substance, you got to indoctrinate. I hate to say brainwash, but you got to properly inoculate. I shouldn't say indoctrinate. You have to properly inoculate kids against the idness culture of the teenage years before they become teenagers. And you got to supervise them in their teenage years. And don't let a bunch of them go anywhere without some adults there to supervise them. It is necessary. Because there are too many teenagers every single year, every crop of teenagers comes into their teen years thinking that they're supposed to be idness every single time, thinking that the most negative stereotypes of us in the Tarzan movies are supposed to be the way we act. And so they acted. And what this means is that we're going to have to tell these young boys, listen, do not listen to music that is designed for a woman to shake her butt in front of other than her husband, or designed for you to shake your butt in front of other than your wife. If the music is for you to shake your butt in public, don't listen to it, especially in front of other people. Certainly don't play it in front of other people, because then they're going to start doing it. Even if you're just trying to hear the lyrics and see what they're saying, they're going to start. Because our music has become a distraction. That's the truth of the matter. And that is the other vehicle. It's not just the TV, because the TV carries mostly the music. And that's the main distraction that keeps them teenagers vibrating at a low level, and it delays the mental advancement and development and maturity of both genders, really. But when you couple that with women being offered ding-a-ling all the time, everywhere they look, from the time that they're 12, really, even by sick bastards that are too old for that mess, they don't have to even mature. That says to them that they don't even need to mature. They're mature enough to have babies right now if they choose to do so. That's the message they get. So substance over style is going to take care of itself if we start going against the culture that prioritizes style over substance. And we're human. We're going to have style. Black people got it. We just got to put that style in front of some substance. And at this point, we're going to have to prioritize the substance. And to do that, we got to tell these kids, look, man, if you go this ignorance route, it's going to affect your pocketbooks later. And that same chick you trying to impress right now, that same chick you're trying to impress with a style at this point, is going to demand from you the same substance you couldn't get because you were prioritizing the style. She's still going to demand both from you. She doesn't care if they're mutually exclusive, because she's not as smart as you. If we don't tell these brothers that, then they're going to go the route of trying to impress these ladies, because that's normal. And then they're going to turn around and, as we know, they're going to get to be our age with all this style, all this swag, and the substance is gone. And when you start getting gray hairs and wrinkles, we already know what the women say then. At that point, it's only about your resources. You can't even have swag and style at that point. They look at you like, why do you have all this swag and style with gray hair and wrinkles and you ain't got no substance? Either way it goes, they keep on coming back to the substance. And if you bring the substance and no style, other women would say your style's going to come over time. But also, when you're bringing all the substance and no style as a young guy, they're also trying to get your substance to chase the guys with the style and no substance. Until, of course, those guys get too old. And I agree, Rael, yeah, control the economy. The thing is, man, it's true. But the thing is, Rael, they got a lot of women around the world whose men don't control the economy. And these women still don't act up and disrespect these men. They're still there. I mean, as a matter of fact, in many parts of Latin America, those men don't control the economy. You got a few men that control the economy there. They may have first pick of ladies, I'm sure. But if a lady's with a regular man, she's not going to disrespect him because he doesn't control the economy. What I'm saying is that in many places, a lot of men don't control the economy, and they're at least not disrespected. At the very least, we're being disrespected. And then if you decide you're going to try to control the economy, you will not only have no help from the sisters, but you're going to actually get pushback from them. And in addition to the pushback you're going to get from them, it gets even worse. While you're trying to build up that substance to get to where you can control some part of the economy, you're trying to do that. They're still sitting up and demanding style. Well, let's say you want to start a family when you're young, which is a good thing to do, because you can have your grandkids when you're young and you got energy. That's also a stable family arrangement. As a matter of fact, Islamically speaking, that's recommended. But let's say you're one of those that wants to do that. No, I'm gonna start when I'm young. Okay, you do that. All right, fair enough. But you're not getting disrespected for all the money that you don't have. That's the thing about that. So yeah, they are heavily dependent on men in other places, but they're also heavily dependent on men here, where I live and where you live in the States. To a certain extent, it's just that there they use the state to take a lot from you, or they use the state to keep you at bay. You could say they use the state really to control you. Whereas elsewhere, the state's not so much involved in that. I mean, here they're heavily they're heavily dependent on men, but here they can work too. They're allowed to work, and a lot of them do. But one thing they do understand is that if they're going to go disrespecting men, they're going to be disrespected by the men. And over there in the States, it's more like we're not going to tolerate disrespect from the men, but we also are going to disrespect the men, because if we don't disrespect the men, other women are going to disrespect us. So we're going to disrespect men, and we're also going to tolerate no disrespect from men. We won't even tolerate honest observations from men. That's the difference between here and there. Here, there's not a social pressure to go disrespecting men. They're not necessarily considered to be pick-me-shas. Here, they get shamed if they're just too sexually loose, or if they get a husband and they run him off, or if there are men that are willing to marry them and they run them off. Of course, if no man is willing to marry them too, these are things they get embarrassed about, either just being too loose, or running off the men that are willing to marry them, or nobody's willing to marry them. That's when they get embarrassed, because that means that they have to do something to chase these men away. And that's what I'm saying. And so, yeah, brothers, we have to realize that we can build this culture. We're just not going to be able to build it with Western sisters, unfortunately. Now, the ones that are going to want to come along and contribute, we do have to be in a position to protect them from the ones that are going to come after them. That's something we would need to do. And Ibn Nur brought that up in one of his comments. They need to have some channels or spaces where they can proselytize to other women. And maybe that won't work, but they do need to have some places where they're not going to be shamed and certainly not physically attacked or even have their businesses boycotted because of that. That is something that needs to be there. So we could provide avenues and spaces for them, even if it's just our living rooms. Even if it's that, we do need to be ready to look after the ones that others would call pick-me's or pick-me-shas. Because there are sisters that are out there defending black men. That is true. They're out there defending them, and we need to be able to return the favor to them. That's a valid point to make, and I'm going to make that before I hear the sisters talking about that. But what I'm also going to say, though, is that the majority of them cannot come with us as they are now. We're going to have to focus on the men for this. And I'm saying this as a father of both a son and daughters. I'll tell my daughters the right way, but if they choose to go that wrong way when they're old enough to make their own decisions, they're going to have to bear the consequences of responsibility and just admit they screwed that up. Not dad. They can't put that on dad. That was them. Because dad told the truth. So I'm going to have to go and get ready to start teaching in the next class. But I've got a few minutes left. So I'm going to see what some of you guys are saying. And while I'm looking at what some of you gentlemen are saying, if y'all want to ask me anything in the comments, go ahead. I wouldn't be able to bring people on now because of the time I don't have left. But, no, actually, sorry. Yep, I got a little bit of time. Just a bit. And I would agree, Ibn Nur. I mean, I've already said that Islam is going to be the solution for black people. I know everybody won't agree, but I've already said it. I put it out there. And when they look up the financial and economic rules in Islam that govern business, when they look up the criminal laws of Islam, when they look up the political system of Islam and the spirituality of the individual, then that's when it becomes apparent. And see, I know y'all can't just take my word for it. Maybe I'm biased because I'm Muslim. Actually, I'm Muslim because I'm biased. That's a different story. But I realize when you all listen to me say that, you can't just take my word for it. And I've even said, do the research. But now I'll tell you what you can look up. Number one, you can look up the financial and economic rules, because those are two different things. The economy is like the finances of the nation, and the finances are your individual finances, your individual monetary situation. So look those rules up. See how much you're allowed to mark up when you do a business. Also look up the criminal punishment codes. That's what people think of when they say Sharia, but really Sharia means the whole legal system that governs even business and finances and economy, as well as criminal punishments, as well as inheritance. When we look these things up, that's when you begin to see it. HTS, I would say you can start with the autobiography of Malcolm X, because a lot of African Americans and Black folks from other countries, they start off with that. I would say that's where you can begin. After that, if you really want to know the truth, there's a guy named Abdurrahman, and I forgot his last name, but he's from the southern Philippines. He's from an island called Mindanao. And he wrote a book called 1,000 Contradictions in the Bible. But he's largely talking about Islam. Just about anything that's been translated by, written by a man named Ibn Taymiyyah is generally good. Also, there's another one called Deeper Roots by Abdullah Hakim Quick. Let me spell his name in here in the chat. Deeper Roots by Abdullah Hakim Quick. Now, when you start on these, you're going to find the other books from there. And now this is, of course, in addition to the Quran, because the Quran is the book that, if you're really interested, that's where you start, definitely. And then you'll find commentary volumes that explain the context of Revelation from an English translation of the Quran. But in addition to that, of course, there's Deeper Roots that I just mentioned. These other books I mentioned are additional to that. And then that's where you find the other books. So I've said that this is going to be a solution for our people. It really is. And unfortunately, though, what you're going to find is that when you join the African American Muslim community, when you join that, then you're going to see that there are some men that are just as trifling as when they were on them streets. And there's some women that are just as trifling as when they were on them streets. They're not the majority, but again, they're a very loud minority. Everybody sees them, everybody hears them. And so oftentimes they may be a turnoff to people that are looking for solutions for a community, not just their own. They may turn them off. When you see them, don't let them sway you. Because not only are they a minority, they're just very loud, but most of them will actually tell you, I'm not the representative. I'm one of the weaker members. Don't let me determine your impression. I'm not reflective of the rules. I'm not following. But you're also going to find that when you get to the family rules, that's really when you're going to see how this can work. That's when you're going to find it. And you're going to understand that there is a reason that polygyny is allowed and polyandry is not. Most of you can figure that out right now anyway. But you will see how it is that a family will become completely destabilized when there's polyandry. And it's going to always be the same thing. It's going to always be the same thing. She's going to tell the wrong husband that he's the father. Every time. Because she can't treat two men equally. We already see that now. The same woman will treat two men differently, even for reasons that they don't deserve. So you'll see that as you do more study. But in this case, what I wanted to focus on, and it's actually something that is integral to the message of Islam, I want to focus on the necessity that we prioritize substance over style until, of course, we have a lot of substance. We're going to have to prioritize land ownership, weapons ownership, political lobbying, because that's more important than voting in many cases. We're going to have to prioritize stability and safety in the form of the weapons and the land. The education as to how to properly operate and store weapons, whether they're firearms or other weapons. We're going to have to prioritize, we would have to prioritize things like agriculture and ways to make agriculture less time consuming. It's already labor intensive depending on what you're growing, but how to make it less time consuming. We would have to prioritize local government in the beginning, but also communication between local governments. That's the thing that we would need. We would also, one of the things we would really need is to prioritize social studies, the knowledge of history and the knowledge of other people, so that we don't get a false impression of our inferiority or superiority. This is also very important. Do we need STEM? Obviously, yes. But a lot of us talk about history, yet we don't actually like to learn any history from anybody. And it can't come from memes. History cannot be taught through memes anymore. That's very important. Memes can't work. They cannot be textbooks. We're going to have to prioritize that as well. We need to know history, and a few people can take care of the historical knowledge that the rest of us would need. But we need to know this because we have a false perception right now of a spiritual superiority over others, and we also have a false perception of dysfunctional inferiority to other people, because we see the people that get the visas to go to the US and live. We don't see the ones that didn't get the visas and had to stay in their home countries, or didn't even apply for the visas because they knew they weren't going to get it. Those aren't the ones we see. And everybody can't travel, but we got to know what's going on, good and bad, in other nations, so we can learn from the good and throw away the bad. You know, eat the meat and throw out the bones, instead of having other people eat the meat and give the bones to us to fight over. That's going to be very important in whatever it is that we do. We're going to need to know, look, no community of people has always been 100% together. Every ship has had its rats. These are the ones that got away with having rats, and these are the ones that had to pay for every rat they had. We're the community that doesn't get away with any of our flaws. And I'm going to give an example of a practical application of this knowledge. See, a lot of us don't understand this. So we start looking at the home continent, and then we say, I'm ADOS, and we start getting divisive against Africans from the continent. Let's understand something. We could say, well, they traded us as slaves, or they sold us off as slaves. They were selling off people in general. That's the thing we need to understand. Because they were selling off captives and prisoners of war, but they were also forced to kidnap each other. People from the coast had wives and sons held hostage, wives and daughters held hostage on the coast, and told you can only get them free by bringing some people from the interior. They don't tell you about this. The Europeans on the coast would keep the good guns for themselves to guard the forts. And then it would hand these busted up or old muskets to the locals and say, now you go into the interior and bring us more people if you want your wife and your own kids back. See, this is something that they don't explain. They don't tell you that they used guns and alcohol to destabilize most of West and Central Africa at the time. So what I'm saying is that Africa has paid for every single one of its sins, and even sins it has not committed yet. But then we want to look at Europe and America like they're some kind of allies. They benefited from this evil and never paid for it. Africa paid for the evil and never benefited from it. But a lot of us want to make this mistake of crapping on people from the continent and assuming that they don't like us when in fact they got different attitudes from each other. Well, if we knew the history, then we would understand Africans from the continent are not our enemies by any stretch of the imagination. They may compete for resources, but hell, they compete with each other for resources. They don't hate us, most of them, and we don't have a reason to hate them. This is what we fail to realize. We look at, say, well, Africa was just a mess and the white man came along and had the tribes fighting each other, so they took advantage of that. No, it's not. No, they actually got a lot of them fighting each other. The only advantages they had were alcohol and gunpowder. Europe did not have any other advantages aside from that, alcohol and gunpowder. That's one example of a practical application of a historical lesson. Because if we don't understand the importance of knowing history, we're going to take enemies that were not enemies. And that's not something we can afford. We already have an enemy we can barely afford to have. They'll turn around and make everybody else your enemy, which is what they've been trying to do in Hollywood. And that was actually less successful than what they planned. So we could take advantage of that. Now, I could tell you all what I'm doing to combat that where I live, but that's another topic for another day. I got to go ahead and get to class and teach it. I want to thank y'all for coming in and listening to me ramble on about the importance of substance over style and why MOT, why we needed to pay attention to that and really ponder that video about the importance of it. Because right now we don't have much substance and we cannot afford to mix with those who prioritize style. We just can't afford that, or else we'll never have the substance. Now, when you have the substance, you can worry about style, and it may even become part of the substance. But right now, that's not it. Right now, we got to do what he said. You cannot mix, even with men that prioritize the style over substance. Because what were they doing it for? They're trying to impress the ladies. Not even ladies, they're trying to impress the girls. Screw grown ladies. They're not trying to impress grown ladies that they're prioritizing that. Wa alaikum salam, Abdullah bin Bobby. We have to keep in mind that even the dudes that are focused on stunting at the club and spending rent money on some grills, even we got to realize that even those cats, man, we can't take them with us. And that's the kind of business you may not necessarily need to go into either. We got to get, I'm talking about the business of making grills for people. Because what you're going to do is you're going to be collecting people's rent money. I worked in a situation like that. Boss was an Indian man, actually. He bought the small jewelry store. He thought he was going to be selling jewelry. The previous owner didn't tell him. Actually, they only come here to buy grills. So when he bought the inventory, he thought he was going to be selling it. No, he had jewelry sitting on his shelf for years before I ever met him that never moved off. The only jewelry they would buy were grills and medallions in the shape of either crucifixes, which is an instrument of violence, or weed, or guns, or knives, usually guns. Anything that did not have a negative image did not move off of his shelf. That's it. Yeah, Abdullah bin Bobby, I paid attention and I wrote some, I spoke and wrote some books. Of course, you start with the English translation of the Quran, if that's his first language. Definitely, I recommended the autobiography of Malcolm X and Deeper Roots because you can find other books even from there. And also, I told them about Ibn Taymiyyah. Whatever from Ibn Taymiyyah has been translated in English is a good place to start because he didn't just pull things out of his off the top of his head, but rather he came from research himself. So yeah, gentlemen, y'all got to keep in mind that's you have to listen to this video and you got to ponder that. And we got to talk to other people about this in real life so that this spreads. Like I said, the message is more important than the messenger. So either hit this share button or please talk to people about this in real life, the importance of not trying to impress these little girls and the importance of not even getting caught up with these guys that are trying to do that anymore and telling young men how important they already are so that they won't grow up thinking that their worth is tied up in how much they can impress an overgrown child. This is necessary. Male chastity is going to be necessary in order to start a culture wherein we prioritize substance over style. And male chastity has to be taught to young men. and it's got to be reinforced in a context. And it has to be protected by supervising them and who they're around when they're in their teen years. I hope that this advice helps. Thank you all for listening. Black heart, black mind, black out, assalamu alaikum, and black heterosexual, non-select male power, just because you know who don't like it.